deciding to go get their hair done. Billiards and pubs. So I just
as we go through with the planning commission and get our site plan approved, I think you'll see that there'll be a tremendous amount of screening and buffering. So really the scale is not going to come to play. Everybody's talked about the scale. 66,000 square feet, when you look at it from the air, it looks really big. But when you look at it from the street, it just looks like a three-story building, right? You can't look from the street and see 66,000 square feet. And especially if we're able to screen it and buffer it, then you're not really going to be able to that size is not really going to come through to the street and to the person that's experienced it at the street level. A couple things I did want to talk about. Traffic has already been addressed here, but while our development, our traffic impact study did generate 562 trips, the thing that we like to focus on from a traffic perspective is not daily trips, it's peak hour trips. So if you look at the peak hour trips of 562, I'm just going to throw out some numbers. AM peak hour for 562 traffics for a senior living community is 35, and PM is 46. So, again, we can argue back and forth over how many units can you put on 10 acres. You could put a bunch or you can put a little. Mark mentioned 2 to 4 is what maybe is in the plan, so let's go with 4. 4 units per acre on 40 acres generates 434 trips a day based on the IT trip generation manual. 434 trips, that's a little over 10 per unit. AM peak factor is 32, PM peak factor is 42. So you're talking about 3 more trips during the AM rush hour from us versus the equivalent residential use. 4 more trips during the peak hour, PM peak hour for the equivalent residential use. 4 units per acre, 10 acres, 40 units. It's also worth noting that probably none of our users are going to have kids in school. Urban Land Institute says that roughly 64 out of every 100 new construction homes is going to generate a school-age child. So if you say 40 units, you're looking at approximately 26 school-age children coming in with that development. So if we're really worried about the infrastructure and we're worried about the crowded schools, that was one of the comments we got from a lot of people. The equivalent residential use is going to put 26 new pupils in the schools, and so it really, in theory, what we're doing might be actually less of a demand. So I'll go back to the zone. What you want to see here is this is our zoning map. This is an exhibit we prepared. It's approximately 10 acres. When we're planning cities and we're planning communities, and we do work with municipalities on their land use plans, we like to plan with nodes, and we like to plan thinking about transitions. From a city planning perspective, it makes all the sense in the world to put a facility like this right next to one that's similar to it. That way we kind of have a node of that community. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Wynn to talk to you guys a little bit more about our facilities and just our culture and how we like to operate.
Good evening. My name is Wynn Bishop. I'm Senior Vice President for Smith Pack. Smith Packet and Harmony have a very long history of providing excellent care to our seniors. These are people that have worked all their life and they've earned the right to be able to live in a facility that takes care of them like we do. It's something that they look forward to. We all have to deal with it, whether it's ourselves, our family, our relatives. We want them to have a choice to be in a nice facility such as what we offer. And we really want we want to help Farragut get there. I do want to focus a little bit on a little bit of what I call misinformation that's been kind of put forth by the opposition of the project. Smith Packet and Harmony are transparent. You know, we'll answer any questions. We've gone to these meetings. We want to tell you anything that you ask. But you know, on the contrary, the dialogue from the leaders of the opposition of this project, I think, has been very disingenuous. The emails that have gone to the communities, some of the emails that have gone back to staff, have all referenced, and I'm quoting here, high-density residential, commercial, high-density development, a high-density project. They also specifically asked the residents to, this is again a quote, do not support rezoning the property north of Ingalls or the proposed project next to Ingalls. None of this mentions senior care. I mean, nothing says anything about even if it had said senior care facility, it doesn't say that. It says high density. So what happens when that gets out to the public? The comments that we've read that come back, again, quotes, we oppose the apartments, the multifamily, the massive apartment complex. We oppose the building of apartments. Don't rezone from residential to apartments. 400 units of apartments. These are all quotes. In addition to that, this is a bad quote. Impact on schools, quote, schools are crowded, schools are overpopulated. So, you know, we're not multifamily, and some people would want you to believe we are, and we're not. As Colin said, we are an institutional transitional use. That's what we are. These seniors are quiet. They're not what they're being perceived to be. We're not multifamily. So with that being said, I did want to bring out one other thing. During the Planning Commission hearing, there was some discussion about had we looked at alternate sites, and that they thought that Smith Packet was a good company, Harmony was good. They acknowledged the need in Farragut. So I felt like we owed it to this board to show you the research on that. So Joe passed out at the beginning of the hearing a map that shows our target market area, where we want to be. There's 2 letters in there from our analysts that explain the target market and why we are very specific on the markets that we choose, and why there's a need in Farragut. The second sheet of that handout has I think it's 8 or 9 different sites in addition to the one that we have under contract that we considered. I don't want to talk about each site specifically because I really don't want to slander somebody else's project, but in summary, the markets were either too small, the land was too small for our use. They were outside of our target area. Some of them were in bad locations behind a truck stop off the interstate in an industrial area. That's not where we want to be. Some of them had physical barriers such as streams and wetlands, great issues. One site wanted to do a master development in 3 years. One wanted high density commercial and didn't want to talk about our use since we're not high density commercial. So, you know, our site process is pretty stringent, and you'll see from our map that, you know, we do have a pretty strict criteria, but we have to maintain that discipline. It's why we've been successful for all these years. It's why we've got almost 50 of these built and still operating, is because we're very particular about where we go, and we want to be in an area that will be successful, and I think you folks would agree with that. So in closing, I just wanted to say a couple of things to summarize what Colin and Joe said. You know, the merits of the project support this. We are a great transitional use. We're actually behind a grocery store and in front of another S1 use. We did turn our building to the west intentionally because we tried to get the building as far away from Baldwin Park as we could. It's almost 430 feet away from Baldwin Park. Most of our buildings are 4 stories. This one we lowered to 3 stories at the suggestion of staff, and it's when you're sitting in Baldwin Park, that elevation view makes it look like it's 2 stories. So again, we've tried to accommodate, we try to be good neighbors, we listen to what the neighbors say, all of these things we've done. I will say this, we've heard this in one meeting, we don't have any interest in expanding our facility. You know, what we've got here is what we've got. Joe went into a lot of detail about the common area, but our buildings are designed with all that common area so the residents can interact and walk from one area to the other. If somebody's parent is there, they can come visit. We've got several cases where a spouse is in memory care, unfortunately, and their husband or wife may be in independent living, but we want them all to have gathering places. About a third of our building is common area. And that's intentional, and that's why we do the buildings the way we do. It's also why we've got no interest in expanding the building down the road. There will be probably housing. It's not my decision, but there'll probably be housing between us and Baldwin Park, so if you're in Baldwin Park, you know, when those houses are built, it's, you know, not going to be any different than really if we weren't there. So one final comment, there was one of the opposition made a comment in their testimony in the Planning Commission that they thought you guys should protect the current residents, and we agree with that. We respect it. We agree with it. But we just ask you not to ignore the fact that these senior citizens are current residents of Farragut. Current residents aren't the people that are able to come out, you know, at night and talk about land use plans. These senior citizens, you know, are at home. They're not coming out and talking about that, but they are a very valuable piece of Farragut. And it reminds me of a hearing I was at a while back, and the mayor, who was in support of our zoning, said, you know, the one thing that broke his heart was his mother was not able to stay in a facility in the town that she grew up in all her life because there wasn't any supply. And it tore his mother up, and his father too, that she had to live somewhere outside of the town that she grew up in. That was her dream, and it you know, it was just very, very sad for him. So just want you to consider that part of this equation, and I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Good evening, Michelle Lauer with Harmony at Mount Juliet, geriatric social worker. The address is 103 Belinda Parkway, Mount Juliet, Tennessee. When the town of Farragut was founded in 1980, there were no provisions set for seniors or an aging population. There was not choice, there were not options. Most of us agree that today choices continue to be limited. Without options, many seniors with the desire or need for senior living will have to move out of Farragut. It has been said that Smith Packet lacks the support to build a senior living community on the proposed land. The comment was made that residents had come out in the cold, in the dark, to spend time apart from their children for input on the land plan. This comment alone supports what I'm here to say. The main population that we want to support are afraid to drive at night. They do not like the cold. Going to bed early seems to be the norm, and many of them do not have the family support to provide transportation to these meetings. I would take an oath in court that I randomly picked 3 Harmony at Mount Juliet residents. I asked them to write a letter to Mr. Shipley. When I say randomly, I mean I had absolutely no clue concerning their technical abilities. When approached, all 3 were willing to write the letter. 2 out of the 3 had no computer. 2 out of the 3 had no email address. The one that had a computer and an email required no assistance in writing the letter, but did need help getting the email sent. To save time, I sent the letters from my email, and just to throw in this fact, all 3 do not drive. This is an excellent example of what I call the silent senior. There are seniors in Farragut right now that are not taking their medications correctly, not getting the proper nutrition, and the majority of their socialization is sitting in front of a TV. EMS and the fire department can give you the first and last names of people that are constantly getting calls for assistance, multiple times a month. That is very common. They are falling in their homes and at times not even telling anyone. EMS, we partner with them to take care of these seniors in the most efficient and dignified way. In the event EMS is called to one of our communities, we ask that they enter the surrounding areas with their sirens off, not only for those that live near our communities, but to maintain the dignity and privacy of the resident involved. You will not get this this preparation in a neighborhood. I would like to throw this into the mix that senior living communities keep people out of the ER that do not need to be there, leaving time and beds open for those that do. We have nurses and physicians to guide us in regards to these issues. But that's a whole different topic. Farragut seniors are one mishap away from needing a senior living community. Actually, we all are if age appropriate. Where will they go? The silent senior. 24-hour nursing to supervise current health situations and situations that can be prevented. Proper nutrition, a plethora of on-site and off-site activities, socialization, a sense of still belonging to the Farragut community, prolonged independence, and a continued purpose, a purposeful life. They no longer have to worry about maintaining their home, getting injured while maintaining their home, or being taken advantage of trying to maintain their home. I think it would be safe to say common sense would tell us that most seniors would live longer in a senior living community than typically in their home. However, Harmony is committed to the quality of life, as stated in these examples I just mentioned. All this sets the tone for being proactive and preventative for our seniors. I wish that I could have brought some of our seniors with me today, even their family members. The letters that I emailed to Mr. Shipley do not do it justice. This is holistic. This is not just about our seniors. This is about their families. They're just as important. We provide peace of mind. Our families can sleep at night. They no longer are caregivers. They get to go back to being a daughter, a son, a spouse, because you cannot do both. Do it well and remain sane. I'd like to end this by saying that when I said holistic, this extends to our employees. I would like to brag on our owners and share with you during the height of COVID. And it was a tough time for us. We were working hard. The Smith family reached deep into their pockets to the tune of $2 million to help with the financial effects that COVID brought into our employees' households. Each and every one of us received a very nice check to help us get through. Why? It goes back to our motto, families serving families. I am sure that the Farragut family wants to do the same for their aging population. Serve your seniors by providing options. Thank you.
Does that conclude your presentation, Smith Packet?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the board members have any questions for these folks?
Are we
No.
doing the question comment at the same time like we did last time? What are we doing?
Yes, sir, we will let the residents speak, and then it will be our turn. And I'll
Okay.
call on each of you. Okay, Allison, I guess you're ready with,
I am. The request has been made for Mr. Farrell to speak first, so, because he's the elderly gentleman here in the front. I'm trying to find his information here. If that's okay with the mayor?
yes. Uh-huh. And Drew will be second. Oh, you want to go second?
My name is Jack Farrell. I live in Baldwin Park.
What's your last name, Jack?
I would like to recommend and
Farrell.
vote for Mr. Horn. He's a good man. He's a good patriotic American. And if he fits into the parameters of the selling his land, I'm all for it. And thank you for providing us with a good place to live.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell.
Our next speaker is Michael Wilson.
Good evening, Michael Wilson, 412 Eisenhower Street, Farragut, Tennessee. I come before you as a private citizen that has been discussing the proposed developments on this parcel since 2015. I helped defeat the Smith Road Apartments, sorry Doug, and assisted updating the S1 ordinance for the village's development. The consistency of this proposal with our town ordinances, plans, and past town decisions. Many have equated this proposal to high-density residential, better known as apartments. What does the S1 zoning district general description say? It states, quote, "This district is also intended as a transitional district to lower density residential by providing for low impact quasi-institutional / residential uses that have minimal traffic demands. This district is clearly intended to be a transition between commercial or office space and lower density residential neighborhoods. This proposal clearly does that." At the last Planning Commission meeting, much was made about the Kingston Pike Boring Road Corridor outreach. I personally participated in that outreach, and S1 was not an option to choose for this location, much less S1 surrounded by lower density residential. I believe many Farragut residents would have supported something like this. However, participants were given a handful of different residential housing types to choose from. Recently, the changes to the future land use map for this area were discussed. This parcel was not updated as the planning commissioners did not agree on lowering the density and how that density should be transitioned across this parcel. In that meeting, Vice Mayor Pavlin also raised her concerns regarding form and function. What I find interesting is that from June to August 2016, Vice Mayor Pavlin voted multiple times, 3 I believe, to approve an almost identical S1 development approximately 100 yards to the west of this property. On August 25, 2016, both Mayor Williams and Vice Mayor Pavlin voted in favor of the villages during the second BOMA reading. That development actually shares a property line with many low-density residential parcels, including Baldwin Park. I would make a note that there is no house or other form that's going to go between the villages and the Baldwin Park southwestern corner. I know that used to be my house there. Back then, there were no objections to form or function. There was also no compatibility objections from the community. There is one big difference between the villages and this proposed development. Unlike the villages, there will be an additional residential development between this project and Baldwin Park. That future development provides for the additional density transition and the appropriate protections for the existing neighborhoods called for in the land use plan. Looking further into past votes in 2016, the villages passed the Planning Commission with a 7-0 vote and the second BOMA reading with a 5-0 vote. Last month, this request passed the Planning Commission with a 6-3 vote. So over the last 7 years, close to a dozen different planning commissioners and aldermen, including the current mayor and vice mayor, voted for this type of development in this area. With these overwhelming supportive votes, one has to wonder, why are so many objecting today? I believe this goes back to January 2021. Between the 2 BOMA votes on the Biddle Farm project, a resident from Baldwin Park sent out an email to many of the town HOAs that said, "I have also received communication that town leadership has no appetite for more apartments in the mixed-use town center. As much as we might not want any apartments in the MUTC, it significantly strengthens MPC and BOMA's ability to say no to apartments elsewhere in Farragut," unquote. Although this is not a request for an apartment complex, it sure has been referred as one, high-density residential apartments, that's been already quoted here tonight. So are the current objections really based on compatibility, or other development-related factors? Or is this all something that was based on a political promise 2 years ago? In closing, I ask that you consider and discuss the S1 general description again. This ordinance was created for a location like this, as evident in the 2016 vote for the villages. Placement between the Ingalls and the residential to the north is completely consistent with the S1 general description and our land use plan. Denial of a request under these circumstances seems arbitrary and capricious. I ask that you do the right thing by applying the town's ordinances and plans equitably and approve this request, just as the town did in 2016 for the villages. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kimberly Parks.
Kimberly Parks, 10701 Farragut Hills Boulevard. Thank you, Board and Mayor, for having us and the community here tonight to speak about this project. I'm a veteran, I'm a mom, I'm a corporate real estate agent, and I work with development investors every day. I would say that my professional opinion is valid today. And I say this because, I may be in corporate now, but I did residential for a very long time. Putting properties that are similar to Baldwin Park directly behind Ingalls is not a very good idea. You will have a hard time selling those properties like that. There have been many people that have said that it's going to bring down the values if you put this property in this location. And I'm here to tell you that it's not going to, because there's already one there. So when we're doing our comparables on properties, we're not even going to even look at the villages or Harmony. We're going to look at homes in the area. If anything, if we were to put properties right up, butting up to Ingalls, those properties are going to decrease in value because they're not going to sell as fast. So you put them on the market at the same value as Baldwin Park, and it's just going to sit on the market because nobody wants their backyard to be a grocery store back end. So that's my one point. Most of us that have supported this project have done our homework quite intensely. I toured Boring Road area. I drove up and down it. I went into and looked at the villages. By the way, the building is gorgeous. Whoever designed it, I'm a big fan. I did a drive-through of Baldwin Park. I got out and I went and I looked around I went out and I looked to see if their view was going to be obscured. It's not going to be. I reached out to the developer and the senior communities in the area, which, by the way, most of them are on waiting lists. So this is definitely a need in our community. So this senior living community is not an apartment complex. Let's get that straight. It's not. We're not going to have loud parties. We're not going to have issues that we would with a normal apartment complex. I went and, as I said, I went to the developer. I asked questions about this project, specifically about the misinformation that was going around on social media. I kept getting screenshots sent to me back and forth, and it was just crazy town. So this project's going to be 200 units. We already learned that tonight. With the 50% of the units being healthcare units, because 60 of them are assisted living suites with 3 rooms max that will have the option to be companion rooms. And then there's going to be 40 memory care suites, which are healthcare units, and 6 of them max will have the option of being a companion room. So with half of these falling under the healthcare units, they're not going to be driving anyways, because the majority of the people that go to these units have health problems that make it them unable to actually drive. I had a grandmother-in-law who lived in a community like this, and it was so beneficial for her. After she lost my grandfather-in-law, she had a sense of community. She loved living there. And she got to be on her own, you know, and she lived there up until she passed away. So, in conclusion, this proposed project, it meets all of the criteria when reviewing the CLEP and reviewing the zoning. It's cohesive. And so I would like to ask the board who are opposed to this tonight to cohesively work with this developer and support our senior community. Because after what I've seen over social media the last few days, it's apparent that they don't. After all, them being on a wait list, most of the senior communities, that's a pretty big deal. Where are our seniors going to go? Thank you, and have a great night.
Is George Cooper. I won't.
My name is George Cooper. My address is 325 Bernie Circle. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I can't believe in coincidence. I was at the MPC meeting last month, and I had just come from my 103-year-old mom's place in assisted living. Same thing tonight. And where she's at 10 minutes away, she's considered Ron the mayor of that facility, by the way. She's doing great. She's an ex-resident of Farragut. I appreciate, again, the opportunity to speak, so I have carefully prepared my words. This proposed project is a 3-story building, plain and simple. It would introduce in form and scale a large resident type building. It would be precedent setting, a stepping stone to point to and use for the development of the remaining portion of the parcel. We've already talked about, I already heard in here, the precedent setting nature of the villages across the street. Approval of the rezoning would invite continuing development, or could in the same manner. Concern and anxiety over this has been expressed repetitively in public meetings without being addressed. Add to this the fact that this is the only area that was not updated, inexplicably not updated on the land use plan to address community input. This has been expressly noted repetitively in public meetings without being acknowledged or addressed. Failing to update the land use plan has apparently created a perceived wide open path to this institutional development and any other multiple residential development. The rezoning request to allow institutional project and other persistent efforts in the recent past to persist with that nature of development appear to have succeeded in distracting the town from completing the land use plan updates. Where are we now? Well, at this point, there's no objective factual basis for approving this rezoning request. Email campaigns, speaker lineups on either side should not overshadow the community workshop input received over the past 2 years. Above all, the land use plan updating effort needs and has to be completed. The previous community workshops, netting input in favor of low-density residential, pretty much drove one type of development for a parcel, the way the workshops were conducted. Particularly for this large parcel, 40 acres, the workshop format should be adjusted. The form and the format should be adjusted to better facilitate and accommodate considerations of multiple types of development and envisioning and delineating suitable transitions. It's too large a parcel to say one thing fits it all. Also, considerations for compatibility with existing neighborhood development and suitable transition need to be encouraged and promoted in that look. I'm optimistic that with stakeholder collaboration, that a process such as that would yield a good resolution for all of us, all the stakeholders. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing that we should all do? Thank you.
Our next speaker is Diane Hall.
Hello, I'm Diane Hall, 668 Brochard Boulevard. I live in the Fox Run subdivision. I'm not directly impacted by this request, but I'm very concerned about the continued loss of opportunities for families to move to Farragut and build homes. Our town has fewer and fewer undeveloped parcels of land. It is imperative that we take a close look at any and all rezoning requests to ensure that they meet the greater needs of our community. This request seeks to take 10 acres of prime residential land and turn it into a senior living community. This community will sit directly next to another senior living community that took 23 acres of residential land in 2016, a total of 33 acres that could become an incredible neighborhood. I stand by my friends at Baldwin Park and nearby neighborhoods who have fought to maintain their home values and community. Baldwin Park is a small neighborhood of about 40 homes. It is somewhat isolated from other communities by Boring Road. I remember my first trip to Baldwin Park years ago. I thought, what an odd little place. It's a beautiful neighborhood, but it doesn't connect to anything. Once I looked at the zoning map, I realized that Baldwin Park is surrounded by land zoned for single-family residential. It makes perfect sense that the folks who bought homes in this neighborhood felt confident that they would become part of a much larger community. Instead, they have faced the continual onslaught of developers wanting to change the nature of their existence. I attended the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission meeting in February. During this meeting, the developer brought in a social worker, she's here today, who spoke eloquently about the aging of America. She advocated for senior living facilities. I do not question anything she said. Yes, Farragut has an older population. Yes, older people eventually need help with daily living. And yes, senior living communities may be the answer. However, she failed to present any factual data showing the immediate need for this in Farragut. She also failed to show why this is the best location for the facility. The FMPC listened to her presentation, and many of the members voted with their gut, a gut that said, I am old. I will only get older. I may need assisted living. Let's build a senior living facility. They failed to listen to the desires of the community and instead dialed into their own fears. I want to assure those members of the FMPC that Farragut has several senior living communities. My husband and I recently moved his mother into a memory care facility, and we visited most of those communities. We were very pleased with what is available in our town. I look around the room today, and I'm happy to see a large turnout of people who wanted to discuss this issue. Fact of the matter is, most citizens of Farragut don't attend these meetings. They don't watch at home. They don't read agendas or the minutes. They don't write emails. Some might say they don't care, but this is not true. They care very much. They embrace this town, and they have confidence in its leadership. Confidence that the people they voted into office are vigilant and will continue to guard the needs of the community. Landowners don't sell land to meet the needs of the community. They sell to make a profit. Developers don't build to meet the needs of the community. They build to make a profit. We must remember that. Instead of focusing on the perceived rights of landowners and developers, we need to focus on what is right for the town of Farragut. I strongly encourage you to vote no to this rezoning request. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Michael Patterson.
Good evening. My name is Michael Patterson, and I represent the landowner tonight. I'm the Executive Vice President of Horn Properties. I've been with Doug for 26 years now. I tell you, when Mr. Shoemaker came up here and gave his presentation, I was excited to see John, and I'm pleased that a Farragut alum is here. I graduated from Farragut. My wife, Doug, we're all Farragut alums, and I think you're in for a treat tonight. You're going to learn a lot. It's interesting because if you get into civic, I'll leave you with this one point and then I'll get on with my presentation because I've only got 4.5 minutes, but I would warn you and caution you that if you get in this route and this is something that you pursue, always make decisions, not necessarily, set aside pride, set aside your heart, and make decisions based on the community, the needs of the community. You can't be selfish in these things. You have to look at it from holistic. And I think that's what we presented here tonight. So let me go over just real quickly. I won't spare you with regurgitating a lot of facts, but I will present, when Mr. Shipley was up here and I'm sitting back there listening to every word he said, I thought, man, I bet that young man from Farragut's thinking, gosh, this is a no-brainer. Yeah, you had a 6-3 vote, supermajority from the Planning Commission. You have Mark Shipley, who's worked here for how many years, approve this? And then what did he say? He said, directly across the street, I could kick a tennis ball over to an existing S1 development, the Villages. What divides these two properties? Well, a road that we built, that Horn Properties built, $500,000 to be exact. We built that road. We sold to Gary Keckley, and he built a beautiful facility. Everybody here, there's nobody here that has said anything negative about the Villages. As a matter of fact, I would say everybody here thinks it's a great addition, right? If you're in here tonight and you're for this project, just raise your hand up high real quick for me. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And I wanted to present this too. I got an email from Mark, and I said, Mark, I've been getting more questions about this development because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and they've been directing emails to me. Have you gotten emails? Yeah, Mike, I'm going to send them to you. So today at 1 o'clock, I have the emails that have been sent to all these aldermen. 50% more of these emails are in favor of this project, much like the room here tonight. Again, seems like a no-brainer. But you're going to hear from the opposition, density. That's a big word, density, right? Mr. Shipley, when you evaluate S1, do not look at density. This isn't about density. This isn't a multi-family development or an apartment complex. This is a senior healthcare facility. It's plain and simple. It's so easy. Don't complicate things, people. We're all smart here. I know that. I can tell by looking at you. Don't complicate things. Senior healthcare facility for an aging population. The median age in Farragut is 49. You know what it is in Knoxville? 34. What's that say? Exactly what she said. Don't make this complicated. It's simple. It's so simple. I've got 1 minute. I'm going to break this down for you. Waverly Court, which we developed, is R3. Directly below Waverly Court is the Villages, S1. Directly below that is commercial and office. Now let's go on the east side of the boulevard. We have Ingalls, which we developed, commercial, proposed S1. And then, even better than on the west side, I have a transitional zoning for you. What will that be? Well, this board will decide that. It may not be this year, it may be 10 years. And then, guess what? R3. Sound familiar? It's on, guys, I can't make it any simpler for you, but you're in for a treat tonight. And remember, when you get older, make decisions. Don't make them personal. Make them on the community. This is a community that needs this. Thank you, young man, for your attendance tonight. And thank you, board.
Speaker is Jeannie Craddock.
Hi, My name is Jenny Craddock, and I live at 424 Port Charles Drive. I have two issues to discuss, both of which are related to this rezoning request. Issue 1. There are two important points that I feel should cause the board to deny this request. First, the proposed rezoning request is completely incompatible with the surrounding zoning. While I understand the importance of supporting the senior community with an assisted living center, this is, in both its form and function, nothing more than multifamily housing. Given that there are no other closely matched zoning or facilities, such a structure would be out of place for this location and a detriment to the surrounding neighborhoods. Second, and most importantly, the numerous community sessions to gain input from the affected residents gave a clear and overwhelming answer to the town staff. Residents that reviewed the facts of the project and who would be most affected were absolutely opposed to this rezoning application. My hope is that this board rejects this rezoning request. Issue 2. The town's code of ethics has relevant language regarding conflicts of interest which should be considered by the members of this board. As quoted from the town's municipal code, it's first adopted in 2007 and then supplemented in 2015, Section 2-151, Disclosure of Personal Interest by Official with Vote, states, quote, "An official with a responsibility to vote on a measure shall disclose during the meeting at which the vote takes place, before the vote, and so it appears in the minutes, any personal interest that affects or that would lead a reasonable person to infer that it affects the official's vote on the measure. In addition, the official may recuse himself from voting on the measure." I have recently learned that there's a long-standing relationship between Alderman White and Mr. Doug Horn, the property owner applying for this rezoning. As I am unsure of the current relationship between Alderman White and Mr. Horn, I would like to pose two questions. 1. Will Alderman White provide a statement that details his current relationship with Mr. Horn? I feel that this account should include the duration as well as the substance of their relationship and describe the importance of this personal association. I'm asking for clarity regarding the affiliation between these two individuals so that the citizens of Farragut can gain a better understanding of the possible motives for Alderman White's vote either for or against the rezoning request currently in front of the board. 2. Given the long-standing bond with Mr. Horn, might it not be appropriate for Alderman White to recuse himself from this vote? I would respectfully request that Alderman White respond to these questions prior to further discussion of this motion. Thank you.
Be happy to, Mayor, if I can have the floor.
We'll get to that.
Our next speaker is Ben Mullins.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. This lady just accused me of something. I think I have a right to respond right now.
I said we'll get to it, Mr. White.
We'll get to it now.
We won't.
All right.
I allowed that woman to attack that man. How dare you, Mayor?
Ben, I think you are up.
Thank you, Mayor. Ben Mullins, 550 West Main Street, Suite 500, Knoxville. That's my work address. I actually live just outside of Farragut limits in Lovell Hills. John Schoonmaker is my county commissioner. And before I represent Horn Properties, but before I put on my lawyer hat and make some comments, I want to make a personal comment because, this zoning affects me personally. My octogenarian in-laws live with me. My mother-in-law is at the end stages of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's right now. My wife is fortunate enough where she can stay home and be a full-time carekeeper. We have not been overly happy with the choices we have, and so this type of use, for me as a Knox County citizen, is desperately needed. There are waiting lists out there. There are a dearth of choices out there. So even though I can't vote, I'm technically outside the town of Farragut. I spent a lot of time in Farragut, spent a lot of time here, so I am invested in what happens in this community, regardless of what role I have as an attorney for the property owner here. Let me touch on a couple of things just legally. When you're making a decision, there's been words that have been thrown around, arbitrary and capricious. In a legislative decision, the actual terminology is rational basis. But the Supreme Court in 1990 said there's really no difference between the two standards. It's just a difference of procedure when you're dealing with an administrative action, such as a variance, where it's, the decision's arbitrary and capricious, or a legislative action where you have to have a rational basis. There has to be some material evidence that you base it upon. And the cases have told us something that I think touches on many of the things that the neighborhood has discussed. I don't need to repeat some of the misinformation that's been in some of the emails, although incidentally one of those emails found its way to me asking me to sign a petition against this rezoning, and didn't mention what the zoning was, just high-density residential, implying it was some type of apartments, without mentioning senior living care or anything about assisted living at all. People want to keep saying this is incompatible with the surrounding zoning. That type of case has been tried before in the Court of Appeals. In fact, the case of Mullins, different Mullins, versus the city of Knoxville, where that was the reason why the city of Knoxville denied a commercial rezoning, saying, well, this is completely incompatible. And the Court of Appeals just looked at the zoning map and said, there are commercial zones within this vicinity of this location. There's no basis to deny saying something is incompatible with the neighborhood. If you look at the zoning map and you see existing zoning, that's the same zoning in place. And that's what we have here. There's S1 directly there, served by a road that only serves these two properties at this point. The other issue I want to bring up, community engagement is essential. It really is. And it's important to get community engagement in what future decisions are made. Now, we've sat here before and talked about the future land use map and what effect it has or what effect it doesn't have, and whether the zoning is. And I understand that when that engagement was going on, the S1 zone, or this being some transitional civic institutional zone, wasn't an option for what this property should have been considered. So people didn't have an opportunity to make an input in that. But when we're talking about neighborhood opposition, you can't base a decision to rezone or not rezone a property on neighborhood opposition alone. There's a case, Anderson County, Sexton v. Anderson County. It says, speculations, fears, concerns of neighbors of political or aesthetic nature, however sincere. And I want to emphasize that because I understand there's a lot of sincere objections here. But if it's just based upon those objections, that does not amount to a legal basis to deny an otherwise valid use of property. And the other case I want to point out, just with neighborhood opposition, with people wanting to engage, those things are important to consider their perspectives, but it has to be a valid reason why they're concerned about it. And I think the evidence presented today is that a lot of this is just fear of what could come in the future, not fear of what this is or what it will be. And there's a case that very plainly had something very similar. Wilson County Youth Shelter versus Wilson County, 1999 Tennessee Court of Appeals case says it's not the function of this board to conduct a referendum on public attitudes relative to a petition. So I agree with Mr. Patterson. You need to vote based upon the evidence, not based upon the competing emails going back and forth. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker.
Chairman, you have violated your own rule. Speaker's comments shall address issues, not individual personalities. Comments may support issues or measurements, but the motives of those different views shall not be questioned or attacked. You allowed both of those things to happen, and it won't give me the floor to address it. You will hear from my attorney.
Okay, please. Mr. White, you'll have your opportunity. I have no idea what somebody's going to say when they stand there. That does not come in front of me to be reviewed to see if it's okay. Okay, nor do you have the opportunity
You
either.
could have stopped it when it started.
No,
You could have given me the opportunity to address it like she wanted me to.
you will have the opportunity to address it when your turn comes, okay?
Everybody's got it soaked in right now. They don't understand. And I should have had the opportunity to address what she said immediately. And you know that. If you violated your own rule, it's right there. You wrote it.
You through?
I'm through for now since you're not going to give me the floor.
Okay. Next.
Our next speaker is Pam Stevens.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Pam Stevens. I live at 200 Battery Hill Circle. And just a caveat before I start, could I get a raise of hands from residents only? Not developers, not engineers, not constructions, but residents only that are for this development. Residents only for this development. For this development. All right. How about residents that are against? Not developers, not construction folks. And those are the ones that were able to come out tonight. I'm sure there's more. The representative for the proposed senior living facility pulled at our heartstrings regarding this silver tsunami in order to justify changing the current land use zone that's enabling construction of yet another senior living facility in Farragut. Did you know that right next door, of course you do now, to this proposed project is a 23-acre senior living facility, the Villages at Farragut. Diagonally across the street is another senior living facility, NHC Place, Farragut, and just around the corner on Campbell Station is yet another senior living facility, the Autumn Care 3, and just down Kingston Pike is yet another senior living facility, the Park Place in West Knoxville, all within Farragut. And I did just a quick, rough search, Google search, and I only looked, I get my directions, east on Kingston Pike, and just within a 10-mile radius of Farragut, there's at least 9 senior living facilities. And then if you went from an 11 to 15-mile radius from Farragut, there's another 5 senior living facilities. Now, they all have different examples, but Farragut is a community and not like a city, a large city, a population with all kinds of dynamics. We're a residential, basically, land or small area. We're not going to annex and grow out. What we need, back to the closeness of senior living facilities, there are many that are close to us, and I just did a very limited search. It's a known fact that the majority of us want to stay in our own homes as long as possible. Try to get your parents to go to a facility. There are numerous advantages to being able to stay in our own homes as we age, including health, happiness, a sense of place, and for some, a conservation of savings. Did you know that roughly you could spend $4,000 to $7,000 a month for a senior living facility? I know from experience that we have an overwhelming immediate need, developers, for homes that seniors can safely spend out as much of our golden years as possible. I know of numerous friends and neighbors who want to stay in the Farragut area, but they can't find a home with a master on the main, a yard that's manageable, a potential for ADA adaptability, and especially affordable in the Farragut area. How many of you know, or you yourself know, have had to, or know someone who's had to sleep on the recliner in the living room because you couldn't get up the stairs? Numerous times after surgery. Another thing to consider is what if, and I'm just going to throw this out there, what if the facility is built, for whatever reason closes? What are we to do with the structure? The most logical thing would be to redesign as apartments, which is exactly what is being proposed at the Renaissance Terrace, an assisted living facility in downtown Knoxville that closed last year, 56 apartments. What's going to happen with Summit View? That was a senior living facility in the Farragut region, and it sits empty. There is a time and place for everything. This is not the right time or the place for another facility. Please represent the majority of Farragut residents and vote no for rezoning at this time. Thank you.
Our next speaker is John Holztrager.
John Holztrager, 345 Bernie Circle. I want to present some additional information that was missed by MPC that I believe it's important for BOMA to know. But first, some context from last month. Smith Packet claimed there was community support for this project, but oddly could not provide any documentation for that. So, lacking facts, they created a diversion. They brought one of their own social workers last month, and again tonight, to give an emotional plea about the so-called need that we've heard so much about tonight, and they played on emotions about our greatest fears. It worked beautifully. I have to congratulate Smith Packet. MPC swallowed the tail, hook, line, and sinker, and it was a really effective sales presentation. But those 6 commissioners that voted yes didn't challenge anything that Smith Packet said. And when a company makes a claim that they can't back up, or tries to distract us with emotional theater, or their infomercial tends to be a little bit questionable, I think we should be very suspicious about everything they tell us. I think behavior speaks to character. I think the people of Farragut would have been better served if MPC had spent time on analysis of the current environment for these facilities in Farragut. They didn't appear to do this, and I discovered a different view of need for this facility. I researched supply and demand with the 2 largest providers in Farragut, Good Works, Villages at Farragut. They are not full. They have no plans to expand anytime soon because demand is so low. Their approved master plan calls for 60 units of assisted living and 20 of memory care. But even if there was demand, their CEO said assisted living and memory care are so labor intensive, they would not consider construction in this constrained labor environment. In his December 14th email to you, Mr. Horn said that Harmony is exactly like NHC Farragut. I don't believe that helps his case very much. NHC has struggled with their census for a very long time, and they failed to fill their newest building for the last 3 years. And to stem financial losses, they were forced to admit very short-term hospice patients rather than the longer-term residents they constructed the building for. The same type of residents that the social worker tried to convince us were lined up and ready to move into Farragut Harmony. I believe that was an attempt to mislead. Besides low demand, the other issue that Good Works pointed out is none of our Farragut facilities can now find sufficient CNAs and nurses to staff up. So building hundreds of Harmony units in such close proximity to our other facilities means not only that we will be way overbuilt, but we will so dilute the already severely constrained labor pool in this area that every Farragut facility will risk plummeting quality of care of our loved ones as they fight over scarce resources, and that fight is already 2 years old. In public and private partnerships, Farragut should expect private enterprise to supply us with rock-solid, objective industry data. Instead, we were fed hyperbole, emotional pleas, and pictures of billiard tables. I believe that was intended to cover up the facts of this supply and demand labor environment. Even some citizens have been confused by this. You may have seen some of the reviews of poorly run Harmony facilities that were circulating around the room. In a Harmony Simpsonville, South Carolina, a reviewer said, "This facility is far from the facade that they sell." We have the chief facade sellers with us tonight. Mayor, aldermen, residents, I don't think there's a need for this facility, even though we've had emotional pleas that it really does have a need. I don't believe it belongs on this site, even if there was demand. I think the town has been misled by Smith Packet, and it's now hard for me to believe anything that they tell us. In closing, I don't think we have bad people in MPC. I think they're doing the best they can with bad processes. I think MPC squandered a lot of citizen trust by not listening to the objective facts that the citizens presented to them. They just used their emotions, and that's not a healthy business process because it's not very repeatable. My request is that BOMA vote this down, direct MPC to quickly improve our Farragut Town processes, and fix the zoning map to reflect clear citizen workshop results. If that does not happen, I fear that we'll all be back here again in 6 to 12 months, wasting more time on the same circus. I think Horn Properties could make very good progress on this parcel if they would be willing to listen and work collaboratively with the community on developing something appropriate, and I, for one, am willing to help with that.
Excuse me,
next-
Mr. Mayor, am I allowed to make a comment? Not-
If they get 2 bites at the apple, then we should too. They've had months to present their case.
Let's finish up with the people that's got,
Our next speaker is Adam Atherton.
and then you'll be able to.
Adam Atherton, 801 Andover, in beautiful Farragut. I'll talk fast. As I'm listening to folks, I have more and more to say. The first thing I want to say to you, Mayor, is unfortunately, I think you're a gentleman, and I appreciate. I'll never forget you give me a great tour. Give me your time to tell me about Farragut. It was a blessing, and it was great to get to know you. But twice, you have failed to hold folks to account during a BOMA meeting. Last meeting, we had another alderman go after Alderman White. Nothing was done at the moment. You finally stepped in, but too much was done ahead of that. And then tonight, even now, there's an accusation on the table against an alderman, and it shouldn't stand. There's an existing rule. That's just something I added at the last minute. As one thing I do agree with John is as far as the practices at MPC, workshops in particular, we see the same problem with advanced knocks. And I could quickly demonstrate it by asking you this. So I come before the board. Let's say that it's required I come before you for even the smallest purchase. And I say, board, I've done my research. I have the prices for the light bulb I need to purchase. So there's a couple options. One is $25. I could buy 2 for $60, or I could buy 3 for $100. So which should I do, board? Should I do A, B, or C? What I just did is called response bias. And there's plenty of surveys, and the MPC surveys included. Advanced Knox has extraordinary examples of response bias where it doesn't give you the full range of options. And as a result, the answers you can provide, the options you've been given are limited and reflect a bias. So I agree with John that some practices at MPC need to change. We need to present all options, including S1 when we're asking about options at this particular property. But in general, when we're having workshops, we should give a full range of options. We may not get the answers we like, but then again, we want the community feedback, don't we? Good. I talked fast on purpose because I wanted to get to the last point in particular about this property. I was on the property today, and there's something interesting going on, and I'm only mentioning it because no one else has yet. But so if you stand in the middle of the property, it's a beautiful piece of land, by the way. If you face south this way, you're just looking at a bunch of trees, and it's much more than this buffer, this 95-foot buffer that we've talked about. It's because of growth. There's many, many more trees than 95 feet for sure. There's flat ground. You're standing on flat ground. There's undulating hills, okay? You look to the west, that's where the Villages is. And on the way to Villages is a beautiful fountain right next to the road, huge fountain with spraying water up. It's really pretty. You got the road going up to that facility. To the left are more trees looking towards Boring. Now, what's behind me? Well, what's behind me is more open land, a bunch of trees, including right behind Baldwin Park. So Baldwin Park is a beautiful neighborhood, and it is elevated a bit above the land behind it. It has a berm behind it, and on that berm are huge trees. And when we look over at Baldwin Park from where I was standing, albeit that's not necessarily the grade where the building will be on, but nevertheless, when you look at Baldwin Park from the land, the middle of the property right now, you see the roofs. So certainly the folks that live there, I know that John's property backs up to this land where the Horn owns. They can see through the trees, but they have plenty of trees blocking the view already. So I hope we could figure out a solution here that works for everybody. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Don Mann.
Good evening. For the young man from Farragut High School, you were getting an education tonight. I don't think any textbook in school is going to cover what you're hearing tonight. My name is Don Mann. I live at 518 MacArthur Lane in Farragut, 37934. I'm speaking tonight in opposition to Ordinance 23-03. I'd like to start off with a question. Who exactly is in favor of this rezoning request besides the current landowner and the firm interested in developing it and all their best friends? What we are talking about is a 3-story senior living community complex. It looks exactly like apartments, and it has a footprint that is 50% larger than the neighboring S-1 zone facility. I personally attended the last 2 Planning Commission meetings on this rezoning request. The overwhelming majority of participants who spoke and wrote in were against it. If the public is against the specific development, why then is it up for vote here tonight? I was under the impression that the comprehensive land use plan incorporates public input. The land use plan specifically offers a vision for future land development. In essence, it's a long-range planning tool that helps protect existing neighborhoods from incompatible new development. In its simplest form, the land use plan helps to ensure proper transition from established neighborhoods to new ones. Over the last couple years alone, many Farragut residents and subdivisions have advocated against developers applying for variances to build either senior housing, apartment complexes, or large grocery stores. So what is the primary issue? That these new proposed developments are not compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods. The proposed Harmony at Farragut project that we're talking about tonight lacks proper transition to the neighboring subdivisions, looks like a high-density multifamily residential, and does not fit in with the vision of the 2012 Comprehensive Land Use Plan. I'd like to close with the same question that I started with. Who exactly is in favor of this rezoning request besides the current landowner and the firm interested in developing it? Thank you for your time tonight.
Our next speaker is Richard Dewson.
My name is Richard Dewson. I've lived here all my life. Used to be Concord. Good people lived here.
What was your last name, Richard?
Richard Dewson.
Dewson.
Duisen, sir.
Okay, your address, sir?
205 Boring Lane.
Boring Lane. Thank you.
Now, the 126-year-old home that I live in may not be acceptable to you newcomers. But being an old timer, I've been rooted in trying to help the people, something that we've all kind of got away from. You can't stop development. Living there, I've only been there 20 years. Still been 45 in the Bluegrass area. I've lived here all my life. When I moved in the boarding home, used to feed the cattle where all the Baldwin Park is now. Did I object to anybody moving in and building a subdivision and being my new neighbor? No. You just welcome people in. Still trying to get along with one another. Now I'm in a situation, healthcare. I had to take my mother to Loudoun County to die. I'm getting ready to take my wife to Loudoun County to die. I see the end coming for every man I ever knew in this town died. But try to do some good while you're here. Bottom line, plain and simple. I don't care how a 3-story building would look on Boring Road. I've been a bulldozer operator for 30 years for TVA. You can't tell me that the 3-story building you want to try to put up for health care, that's the reason we're here, and I'll get to that. I've run a bulldozer for 30 years. If you ever want to stay in East Tennessee and love the area that we live in, understand the 3-story development is not on top of the hill where Baldwin Park can look at the Great Smoky Mountains, guys. That's why we're here. We live in the best part of the world that we could be in, all of us. Thankful Farragut come along. Hate that y'all took it away from the Concord boys, but I've been here all my life. I'm in need of health care. I've got a father-in-law that lived, born on the Boring property. All their life, all they knew. Don't have health facilities to go to, and he helped build the Concord Baptist Church that I hope a lot of you go to. Sure did, helped people in the community. We need health care, guys. I don't want to take my father-in-law out of town to die. And I don't want to take my wife out of here. The doors couldn't get built. I don't know who you guys are, but I know you're not building a trailer park. I know you're going to make something nice because Farragut has made this place better to live. Still wanting to be here. I had an option to leave. I wanted to be here. And I still want to stay here. I got my tombstone carved out and I want to live and die here. I was born, that's all I know, guys. My better part of the family's all gone. So I'm speaking for my family and from my heart. I don't care how much money's involved. I want to be able to live here long enough to die here. I'm saying, I got a father-in-law needing health care 2 years ago. I got a wife that's got Alzheimer's and ain't going to live long enough until the doors can get open for help for us all. I'm saying tonight, and I'm going to close, because I had to make arrangements for somebody to take care of my wife so I can get back home right now this evening. The only thing that I see that Farragut has done is keep us a nice, safe place to live. Beautiful to look at. Go anywhere you want to go. You won't ever find a better place to live right here in the Smoky Mountains. I look at the Smoky Mountains every morning when I get a cup of coffee off my front porch. Any of you is welcome to come by. I can only help and be a neighbor. But I'm telling you, we need health care. And the way this world's changing, boys, we can't get good quality help in here fast enough. It's just the way I see it. I need to go home, get with my wife, but I want to take just a moment to thank the town of Farragut, even though I've been here 70 years. 20 years in the old Boring home, but my other 45 right here in Bluegrass. Thank y'all for hiring my wife and giving her a job. It was the best thing that ever happened. So thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Speaker is Ed Sharkey.
If we ever get it through it.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Ed Sharkey. I'm at 305 Bernie Circle in Farragut. I have no financial or other interest in this matter apart from being a resident. Transparency in government enhances public trust, and it fosters stability when citizens can see how government makes their decisions and understand the reason for those decisions. The reason part of that aspect of transparency is very important as well. For when government makes decisions that are not well-founded, citizens are left to speculate what is the reason that this decision is being made this way, and alternative explanations are rarely optimal. The recommendation by MPC falls into that category of decisions that are not well-founded. In almost every case where a member of the MPC voted in favor of this proposal, the member referenced some form of need. In each case where need was the basis for the recommendation, the member ignored the stated will of the community in order to favor this perceived need, and I am not aware of any objective ground in the record to support a finding of need. In the domain of housing, government decisions are always based on facts, surveys, research, data analytics. We have none of that in this case. Not one supporter on the MPC referenced objective criteria that would establish a need for this project, such as a comparison of actual housing demand versus relevant supply in the area, and why the demand will not be met by the supply provided by the 7 other senior living facilities in our town. One member of MPC who supported the zoning change conceded the importance of this issue. He stated that this is the most significant issue he has faced in the 5 years he has been called to serve. Yet here follows the exact basis stated at the time of their vote by each MPC member who perceives a need which is so great that public sentiment must be ignored. Quote, I do foresee a need. I hope that I don't need to be in a facility like this someday, but I may very well need a facility. And whether or not there's a waiting list today, or a lack of a waiting list, or a waiting list in the future, I do think there's a need for this for the entire community, period. Next, quote, I have had family members in the past who have been in a facility, and I was certainly glad that there were people who had the skill, knowledge, and ability to work with those family members. With my advanced aging, I can see that I am coming sooner than later, and I hope that I can find a place that I can be as happy and satisfied as my mother was at the time, period. Next, quote, I think it serves a great community need, period. That's it. There's not a scintilla of objective basis for any of the statements and findings of alleged need that supported the recommendation of the MPC to this board. And when we as citizens, contemplating the decision of government on the most important land use issue that's faced the MPC in 5 years, see that our overwhelming preferences have been ignored in favor of a purported need so negligible its supporters cannot identify a single objective basis to say so, we face the fact that there is no legitimate reason to approve this request, no rational basis. And that does terrible things to public confidence. Any board member who plans to favor this approval on the ground of need, I think it's reasonable to ask that you please explain with specificity what is the need, what is the demand, why will that demand not be met by available supply, and what is the basis for your conclusions. Please be specific. Even the developer cannot do it. Each time that they've had the opportunity to come before either the committee or this board to demonstrate a need, what they've provided is anecdotes. moving and compelling anecdotes, but anecdotes nonetheless. And if there is no established need, no objective basis to demonstrate that, then there is no rational basis. And I do not see how you can vote to approve this. Let the owner develop his property as it's been designated. Why should his preferences and his wishes exceed those of the rest of us, who all purchased or developed our property consistent with the way it was zoned when it was purchased and developed? Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is.
Council, we're going to take a break right now.
Okay.
Yes.
Do we still have more?
I was about to float out of
Here in a minute.
What, he says
Don't
you
matter.
just have one more.
Hmm?
She has one more.
I have three.
Folks, I'm ready to get back at it. I want to thank everybody for their patience, but 2 hours is long enough to, between breaks nowadays. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Jeannie Burkowski.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeannie Brykolski. I live on Crestview Road in Bel Air. My husband and I bought our first home in Kingsgate in 1978. We moved to Bel Air in 1995. My family actually moved to Village Green in 1972, so I am definitely a longtime resident of the Farragut, Concord Farragut area. I originally had not planned on speaking tonight, but after hearing quite a bit of the things that were said by Smith Packet and Harmony, quite frankly, it got my dander up a little bit. And some things I wanted to bring up. Yes, there are an aging community. One of the things they were saying about Knoxville, Knox County being the average age being 39, well, yes, UT is in Knoxville. That is all college students. That skews the age. And actually, when they said it was 49 in Farragut, I didn't think it was that low. So, anyway, some of the comments made by the social worker about senior citizens don't want to drive at night, don't want to leave home at night, so on and so forth, I found quite offensive. I'm 66. I'm a senior citizen, technically. I refuse to accept that I am a senior citizen, but technically I am one. And guess what? It's after dark, and I'm not at my house, and I drove here all by myself. And I know there's a bunch of people here, because I know some of them, who are over 60. And guess what? They're here, and they drove all by themselves. So I didn't appreciate having a vibrant part of our community. Some people still work. My husband will be 69 next week. He still works. We do volunteer work. We work in our yards. We hang with our friends. We come to lots of community meetings. Just because we are in the pigeonhole that people call senior citizens does not mean our lives are over and that we can no longer take care of ourselves. I personally plan to stay in my home forever. They will have to drag me out of there with my fingernails clawing at the floor. Now, the senior tsunami is a real thing. It is coming. But as John mentioned, there are senior centers near Farragut, that have empty beds. And that was something I already knew because my heart daughter works at a senior living center. And speaking of when you live at a senior living center, most of them are anywhere, as somebody mentioned, $4,000 to $7,000 a month. I can't afford that. I don't know how many people can, especially if there's two of you and it's per person. Farragut is mostly a middle-class community. Middle-class homes, upper middle-class homes. We are not a community of $1 million to $2 million homes and the incomes that go with it. So, like I said, there was just a lot of things that got my dander up and quite frankly offended me. Every single person that is here tonight, whether you came in opposition or you came to support the project. Now, a lot of people here that came to support the project are associated with Smith Packard. They're associated with Harmony Senior. They are friends and or family or employees of Doug Horn, or like Mr. White, a longtime friend of Doug Horn. So, we've got to put everything in perspective. I think Harmony sounds like a really nice place. I was disappointed to hear the reviews and read the reviews about it. And I know that no matter how hard you work, there's going to be some places that fall through the cracks. And maybe someplace else in Farragut, would be a better fit. So anyway, I just want to say I stand with my neighbors and our community to protect our neighborhoods, our families, our homes, and our property values. Y'all have a good evening.
Our next speaker is Mike Mitchell.
No, I'm sorry. Citizens Forum, not
I'm sorry. I just lumped it with all the others. Sorry about that. Our last speaker is Doug Horn.
Thank you. I'm Doug Horn, 12103 South Fox Den. My daughter here, Susan's with me. My wife would have come, but she's got some arthritis problems. Wynn showed the town the analysis as to why there's a need for assisted living memory care. He showed you the great detail. Ed Sharkey was incorrect on that. There is a great need. And let me say, first off, we cannot, you on the board, I cannot decide how many grocery stores need to be here in Farragut, how many churches need to be here in Farragut, how many senior living. It's people that make the investments, Alderman Myers, that decide those things. They've made a great analysis, and they know that there's another need for assisted living memory care. The villages, I know Gary Keckley well. We helped him with the project, and Mark Shipley did a great job getting the approval, helping us get the approval of the S1 there. And they probably haven't built the other units because construction costs have gone up a lot. Interest rates have gone up a lot. That's probably why he hadn't added. But these gentlemen are putting $60 million in Farragut. They haven't asked for a TIF development. They haven't asked for any subsidy from Farragut. They're putting a $60 million investment here because they made a good analysis. And Wynn can show you again the flow chart, the chart that proves that there's a need for this assisted living. I want to say that I'd like for you all to remember there are a lot of people in this town that do work in this town at a service other than the aldermen. We do too. We've been here. David White and I went to high school about the same time. We certainly knew each other. He was a great football player. I was a minimal basketball player, but we have friends. I know Barbara Nesbitt was here. I think she just left. I've known her for years. We've lived in this community for 65 years. We've owned this property. My wife and I have owned this property for 41 years. We're not going to put housing right behind the Ingalls. Like the real estate lady said, that's a bad move because the houses wouldn't sell very well right behind Ingalls. This assisted living memory care will work really well. The things we've done in this town, I want to just list real quickly. We did have a lot to do with the S1 healthcare facility, Mayor Williams, that Gary Keckley did. A lot of the Waverly Court people, we built Waverly Court. A lot of the Waverly Court people have moved down to the villages, and we did the we did a lot of other development in this town that has helped the town. Before I hit that, I want to again thank the staff for recommending approval of this proposal, and I want to thank the Planning Commission that voted 6-3. I want to thank the Planning Commission. I don't know of any vote that the board has ever taken that overruled the staff, Mr. Shipley, and the Planning Commission. So I'm certainly hopeful tonight you will vote approval. We've done a lot of things in this town that help this town. The Walmart we first built over there, the CVS, the Ingalls, the Coles. We've done a Derby Run and Lanesboro Apartments. These are, of course, not apartments. This is assisted living memory care. We built Glen Abbey and Derby Chase. We gave land to Christ Covenant Church down at the end of Kingston Pike, 12 acres, a gift to the church. We're members of Cedar Springs. That was one of our plant churches. We sold the land on Watt Road to the Bob Leonard Park that the town wanted us to sell, and we sold it cheap to the town because I think that was when Eddie Ford was mayor, and they wanted to buy that property. It was 20 acres. We sold it to the town for Bob Leonard Park. So I'd like to say we are a good corporate citizen. Also, we have a radio station that we broadcast a lot of things the town wants to put on the radio station. We have a newspaper, of course, that's the fourth estate of government. The newspaper, we have a newspaper we started in 1988, Farragut Press. We're proud that we have that. Alan Sloan's here tonight. There's no question that there's a need for this project. We don't want to have to use legal action to get it. However, we're not going to not develop our property just because somebody objects to the type of use that we think is appropriate. Now, John Wright was going to speak tonight, one of our guys. It's approved in S1, I mean in R1, we could put a cemetery there. Cemeteries are approved in R1. Now, we don't intend to put a cemetery there. We do hope to have this approved tonight. Thank you.
That concludes our speakers.
Okay, at this point in time, I'm going to call on Mr. White. He has to speak concerning the point made.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You have the floor,
Appreciate
sir.
it. Yes, I'm a friend of Doug Horn's. I have been for years. We moved here. My family moved here when I was 5 years old. I've been here 65 years. Doug and I went to Farragut High School together. We lived 2 houses apart for years. His children played with my children. My son went on vacation with their family many times. We've been friends for years. But to quote the section that the lady did in the code, and believe me, I read the code, but to quote that section of having a personal interest, that's one thing. But in order for that to be a problem, you have to be involved financially. You have to receive some kind of reward. You have to be paid. So if you're indicating that I've got some financial interest in that group, you better have some proof. I can tell you that. You better have some evidence. Because when you accuse somebody of wrongdoing, I have no personal interest in that project. I don't own any of the land. I'm not a partner in that company. I don't work for that company. He just happens to be my friend. I have many friends. Like I said, I've been here for years. I know a lot of people. I've voted on a lot of things that affected other people, but I've never been accused of any wrongdoing. And as I say, if you're going to do that, you best be right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Can I just follow up really quickly? That'd be nice if the rest of the community took what he just said for me. Have some damn proof. If you're going to make accusations of me, have some proof.
Okay, that concludes that portion. Next will be some discussion by the board members, and we'll start out with Mr. White.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the floor. Yes, I am in favor of this facility for several reasons, and mostly it is the senior population. I've voted since I've been here a short time on millions of dollars for ballparks, for soccer fields, to redo soccer fields, walking trails, everything for middle-aged people or people that have good health. We've got the best facilities in the world right now for people who don't have medical problems. But if you've got medical issues, then unlike one of our speakers who drove down here all by herself at night and works in her yard, this is not for those people. This is for the senior citizens who have medical issues that just want a better quality of life. If you've never gone through that, I hope you never do, because I have. You have to take a person out of their home, away from everything that's familiar to them, and away from their family, and put them in a place they're not familiar with. And then lo and behold, their health gets worse. What do you got to do? You've got to put them through that trauma again. They've got to move out of there, go somewhere else, be away from their family, be away from their homes, be away from everything. And then lo and behold, if their health gets worse, you got to move them again. That's not right. These people need help. If they didn't need help, they wouldn't be in one of those. You're not going to have a lot of people in those that work in their yard or use our walking trails or go play on our soccer fields or play tennis or play pickleball, which is a big thing. That's not who this is for. This is for the senior citizens that are getting unhealthy and need help. And a philosopher said one time, and I can't tell you who it is because I'm 77 years old and I may be in this place sooner than I want to be. But a great philosopher once said, you can't stand out until you stand up. So yes, I'm going to stand up for the Planning Commission who voted to approve this, and I'm going to stand up for the sick and disabled that want to stay in this community, stay around their family, their friends, and their neighbors, and live out the rest of their life in the greatest comfort as possible. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll give you the floor back.
Okay. Next will be Vice Mayor Pavlin.
Thank you. First off, I wanted to just, as an aside, Mark went to great pains to write a staff report where he didn't make a recommendation. So he did not recommend this. He did not recommend this. He simply pointed out the positives and negatives of this for us to consider. I think this is one of those that's been a struggle, certainly from the staff's perspective. So I just wanted to make that clear for Mark's sanity. So I always like to set my points out, and I know particularly when it comes to rezoning requests, that we do have to have a rational basis, and it's not. You really do need to have a clear understanding of what it is, either way that this is people's land and property, and you need to be clear about how you're landing and why you're landing. So the history of this property: the town was founded in 1980 to chart our own course as a community. In 1982, we adopted our own zoning ordinance and zoning map to reflect the zoning districts. The bulk of the property that is the subject of tonight's discussion has been zoned R1 since 1982. In 1982, 1987, and 1992, rezoning requests were approved to rezone residential property to allow for commercial development of the portion of the property that fronts Kingston Pike, which included the Old Ingalls in 1982, in addition to the Old Ingalls in 1987, and a theater, I believe, in 1992. In each of these zoning requests, a 95-foot deep buffer zoning district was required to protect the property behind the commercial development, which was zoned primarily R1 rural residential. Until the adoption of the 2012 CLUP, this property had been envisioned to develop out as very low-density single-family residential, with the buffer district remaining in place. The buffer district is not a transition. It is not intended to be a transition. According to the Town of Farragut zoning ordinance, the intent of this zone is to provide for a higher intensity land use to occur adjacent to a lower intensity land use, while at the same time protecting the lower intensity land use from the negative impacts of the higher intensity land use. The land zone buffer district is to serve as a cushion or shield between these conflicting land uses. These areas should be retained in their natural state and should be supplemented with additional landscaping so as to provide a visual and aesthetic separation between the conflicting land uses. The area between the old New Ingalls and R1 zone property remains zone buffer and is dedicated open space on the current future land use map. The buffer remains intact. It is heavily wooded berm that blocks the view of the rear side of the old and New Ingalls. The undeveloped property, tax map 142, parcel 69, is located south of Baldwin Park, east of the villages, north of the buffer district, and southwest of Bucolic Bourne Road, which is protected by a mature stand of trees. In particular, there is a 300-foot heavily wooded property that separates the east side of the village's main building from this undeveloped parcel. The history of planning in Town of Farragut. Town of Farragut has a statutory authority to adopt an official general plan. Town of Farragut has a long history of community engagement with land use planning. In fact, community involvement in planning lies at the very heart of the reason the town was founded. The first comprehensive plan, Farragut 2000, adopted in February 1991 under Mayor Bob Leonard, set the example for community engagement. A major update to the Farragut 2000 plan was adopted by BMA in February 2001. The current comprehensive plan was adopted by the MPC during its December 2012 meeting. The consultant who assisted with the 2012 update was chosen because of its experience with public engagement. The Kingston Pike Smith Road Boring Road area. When the club was adopted in 2012, there was interest in the Kingston Pike Smith Road Boring Road area developing into a mixed-use neighborhood node. At the time of the plan's approval, it was assumed that the old Ingalls would be demolished, and as a result, an interesting opportunity for neighborhood-scale mix of uses and a mix of housing choices could be considered. Since 2012, Ingalls Corporation decided to rehabilitate the building instead of demolishing it. Land on Boring Road has subdivided into estate-sized lots, and it has been determined that Baldwin Park was designated inaccurately on the original future land use map. Baldwin Park has a density of 2.34 units per acre. The neighborhood should have been designated very low-density residential on the future land use map. This area has evolved in a way that does not support the 2012 vision of a mixed-use neighborhood node. We have used the public visioning workshop to update the future land use map. The town of Farragut has a statutory authority to not only adopt a general plan, but also to amend that plan. Policy 2 on page 5 of the comprehensive land use plan states in part, the plan should undergo a major review and update if appropriate, at least once every 5 years. A steering committee was formed in 2017 to begin the major review of the plan that was adopted in 2012. On page 6 of the plan, it states, major updates should include substantial public outreach to help check that the current plan reflects current attitudes. The planning staff and MPC have established and utilized a process that provides for public input called the Public Visioning Workshop. The Public Visioning Workshop produces quantifiable data to assess the current attitudes of the public. Public visioning workshops have been used to gather input for the Watt Road corridor, the Snyder Road Outlet Drive corridor, and the McPhee Road corridor. Those corridors were updated based on the public input received from their respective public visioning workshops. We have adopted the recommendations that came from the public input we receive. Regarding the Kingston Pike Smith Road Boring Road sub-area on the land use map, 2 public visioning workshops were held, one in November 2021, one in March of 2022. These meetings were well attended. The results of these public visioning workshops clearly indicated the public wanted the area north of the buffer district and the old new Ingalls to be designated very low-density residential, which is consistent with the land use designation of Baldwin Park, the area along Boring Road and Village Green. Given that the area is buffered from the higher intensity land uses to the south and to the west, very low-density residential is consistent with the current zoning of the property and the existing residential developments in the area. The proposed Harmony project is high density in form and scale. The proposed building scale is much larger than low-density single-family residential. It's a form and scale the public has indicated they do not want to see in the area. It opens the door for high-density use to be considered on the remaining portions of this parcel. Housing demand for every form of housing can be demonstrated. We cannot possibly address the housing supply issues we're experiencing in the Knox County region. The town of Farragut should remain focused on our long-term vision. Public input regarding the vision for this parcel is abundant and clear. They want it to be very low-density residential, single-family residential. At the time of the adoption of the Comprehensive Land Use Plan in 2012, the town had 4 senior living facilities: NHC Assisted Living, Park Place Senior Independent Living, Avenir Memory Care, and Summit View Nursing Home. Since the Comprehensive Plan's adoption, 3 more senior living facilities have been added: NHC Memory Care, Autumn Care Assisted Living, and the Village's Senior Independent Living with plans for memory care. While Summit View is currently closed, it remains a facility with capacity. There has been much stated about the need for more senior living facilities, but there has been no objective proof that there is an actual need or that the need is required to be fulfilled within the boundaries of the town of Farragut. A review of the traffic impact study filed with this project and a comparison to residential districts including very low density and low density residential shows that the proposed project generates more traffic than all the residential uses the public has repeatedly indicated they prefer. R1 OSR would generate 198 trips. R3 would generate at max 283 trips, and R4 at max would generate 432 trips. These are all below the 562 trips generated by this particular project. I'm almost done. In early January 1980, during the last public meeting before this area's residents voted on the issue of incorporation, Betty Dick, the heart and soul of the founding of the town of Farragut, stated, "We in the community can do a better job of planning, zoning, and developing than either Knox County or Knoxville. Farragut can be a responsive and responsible decision-making government of the people. The only way to achieve this is to incorporate." I contend that having our own planning, zoning, and development standards lies at the heart of the reason we were founded. This is what distinguishes us from Knox County and Knoxville. We were going to rely heavily on a community-focused planning process, which relied substantially on public input. In voting to recommend approval of this rezoning request, the Planning Commission ignored the public input received through its own established planning process. This undermines the public trust in the planning process and undermines the foundation upon which this town was founded. The public input received through the public planning process was clear that this area should be designated very low-density residential. This property is zoned R1, and before the adoption of the comprehensive land use plan was envisioned to be low-density residential. Support for the vision in the comprehensive plan when it was adopted no longer exists. The area in which this rezoning is proposed is protected by large mature stands of trees to the south and west, and an existing built environment to the north and east of this property that is consistent with the expressed vision of low-density single-family residential. The proposed rezoning request allows for a high-density development in form and scale, which is inconsistent with the vision expressed by the public. In addition, the proposed development will generate more traffic than the low-density single-family residential the community has stated in their vision. The proposed rezoning request would allow for development that is incompatible with the vision expressed by the public through the formal planning process. And that's all I have.
Okay, next will be Alderman Burnett.
Thank you, Mayor. You've heard two sides that are on polar opposite ends of each other tonight say, one side say this is very clear cut, this is what you should do, and then on the other side we've heard the exact same thing, which is this is obvious, how can you not do this? I can just tell you personally, this is weighed about as heavily on me as any other decision I've made being a part of this board, because it affects residents, it affects our community in a big way. The two major factors that I've been focusing on is resident input as well as alignment with the goals and strategies of the comprehensive land use plan. As a resident, I understand the frustrations of living next to vacant land that has the potential for development. When we bought our home, we backed up to a large, beautiful farm, and the first thing I did was call the landowner and ask what their intentions were with the land. They said they had no intentions of selling anytime soon, and we were ecstatic. Fast forward 12, 18 months, and plans were in the works to fully develop every inch of that land. Wasn't angry at the landowner, they have their rights, but next I wanted to ensure the property was developed according to resident input as well as in accordance with our zoning regulations. As we look at the property in question this evening, I've evaluated the public feedback along with our current zoning regulations, and the question I've been deliberating on is how we effectively transition from C1 at Ingalls down to an appropriate zoning level that abuts Baldwin Park and the surrounding areas. An appropriate transition in my mind would go from high density, high impact at Ingalls to a lesser land use impact immediately to the north of Ingalls, and then a less density and impact to the remaining property adjacent to Baldwin Park. S1 is what's being requested for the 10 acres behind Ingalls. In a general sense, I think the S1 zoning district is a nice potential fit for this property. This S1 designation is a transitional district in nature which could fit very well for the property behind C1. My concern for the proposal in front of us is this. I want to see a transition in form and scale from Ingalls to the 10 acres under consideration. As I look at the current proposal, the intensity is in line with my expectations of transition. However, the form and scale are not as much. Transitioning from a 1.5-story shopping center to a 3-story civic use form does not align with my view of a proper transition. While I understand the traffic impact to be manageable and cars will only be funneled to Village Commons Boulevard, I'm not convinced fully that a large 3-story building behind a 1.5-story C1 shopping center is a transition I'm comfortable with. I think it could make sense to see a building with more form and scale that's more compatible with the residential setting located to the north. I could possibly get on board with a building and use that has a more residential feel. One example of the form and scale protection like I was describing is, which was brought up earlier, is Autumn Care on Campbell Station Road. It's a 1-story, that's how it's classified, it has a basement, but it's a 1-story senior living home that abuts single-family residential. The form and scale of this development has a much more residential feel, and it transitions very well into the neighboring residential homes. One way this could be accomplished, this residential look and feel surrounded by residential, would be to use the R3 height restriction, like what's already in place at Baldwin Park, and apply it to this proposed development on the 10 acres. This would allow appropriate transition behind C1 to pave the way for single-family residential behind the 10 acres that might one day abut Baldwin Park. So I would be willing to support a condition to this rezoning request to have an R3 height, which is the same as Baldwin Park, restriction on this 10 acres as a way to see more favorable transition from C1 to S1 and eventually to single-family residential.
You done? Okay. Alderman Meyer.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. Most of the municipal planning commissioners who recommended this assisted living and skilled nursing facility did so based on the premise that Farragut's aging population needs such a facility. Respectfully, I believe an appointed board of volunteers with no population health planning experience is not qualified to determine the health needs of a given population. However, the Tennessee Health Facilities Commission is qualified to do so. As a matter of fact, all new nursing home beds in the state of Tennessee are regulated by the Tennessee Health Facilities Commission through a Certificate of Need program. The Tennessee Health Facilities Commission, or THFC, uses multiple criteria to determine a population's need for additional nursing home beds, which I believe can broadly be applied to assisted living and senior adult living beds as well. One criterion is a reasonable service area, which is defined by the THFC as, quote, a majority of the population of a service area for any nursing home should reside within 30 minutes travel time from that facility, unquote. Based on this criterion, the service area for this proposed facility would stretch well beyond the 16 square miles that make up our hometown and would include portions of West Knox and eastern Loudoun counties. Other THFC population health needs criteria include identification of existing institutions in the service area, as well as their occupancy rates. From a conservative, cursory review, I identified the following number of Farragut and West Knox County facilities within a 15-minute drive: 6 nursing homes with 657 beds, and 17 assisted living facilities with 1,326 beds. I did not review facilities in eastern Loudoun County, which would obviously add to these numbers. In terms of occupancy rates, I personally contacted multiple facilities located inside of Farragut, and none of them told me they had a waiting list for beds. When considering the Tennessee Health Facilities Commission's population health needs criteria, I believe the assumption that Farragut residents need another assisted living and skilled nursing facility because we are aging, and without consideration to 1, existing institution capacity, and 2, how well we are aging, is a stunted assumption that is based on a facile generalization. I believe most Farragut residents have access to healthy food, healthcare services, exercise facilities, such as our beautiful walking trails, sidewalks, and parks, as well as local gyms and home exercise equipment. From my perspective, these positive social determinants of health improve quality of life and increase the likelihood of prolonged independent living for Farragut residents. Therefore, I reject the need premise of this recommendation from the Municipal Planning Commission. Additionally, over the last 4 years, I have received lots and lots and lots of resident input. By attending HOA board meetings, conversing with constituents, and reviewing town workshop comments overwhelmingly supporting keeping this parcel's residential zoning. Residents believe the traffic impact from the proposed facility would be greater than residential development, and the form of the proposed facility is not compatible with the residential property surrounding the parcel. I hear the residents. I will be their voice, and I will vote against this requested zoning change. Thank you.
Well, there's been a lot of good points made tonight. As you see, I've made a tremendous amount of notes. I had 4 pages like this from the Planning Commission. I think John in the back said something about working with some sort of other type of development. I think Drew touched on that as well. And that certainly is an option. I look at it as, is it a good fit? I look at it as, is it appropriate for this district? And I look at it as, is 200 units really a transition? So this is what I have to decide on, and I'll make a decision when I vote. So with that, with discussion closed, I will ask for the town recorder to please take a roll call vote.
Alderman Burnett.
Yes.
Alderman Meyer.
No.
Alderman Povlin.
No.
Alderman White.
Yes.
Mayor Williams.
Mayor Williams, no.
What was the vote? Was it 3-2?
Yes.
3 Burnett voted for it. May I ask something, Mayor? Have you ever had a situation with a zoning request where the staff recommended it and the planning commission approved it?
Sir, please go up to the microphone so that this can,
Okay, yeah, I'll be glad to do that.
that's the,
Staff didn't recommend it.
What I was asking was, have we ever had, and maybe Mark Shipley knows, have we ever had a case where the staff did, Louise, recommend it, and the
He didn't
planning commission voted 6-3, and the board turned it down?
Mark didn't recommend it.
What this is going to do, Mayor, is we have to have a lawsuit. John Holstrader said one time, how do we resolve this? In court. That's what we do. Y'all are totally unfair and unequal about this, and I think it's ridiculous. Here, we had a $60 million investment, Mayor, Alderman Myers and Burnett. I think Alderman Burnett voted for it, but we had a $60 million investment in the town. They didn't ask for a TIF that other people have gotten in this town. We didn't ask for any subsidy, and you voted down. Unbelievable. So we'll see you in court.
okay, sir.
It's all personal, just like I told this young man. I just hate that he had to witness that.
Okay, please let the record show that ordinance 23-03 has been voted down by roll call vote, 3-2. Thank you. Okay, next will be the town administrator's report.
Mayor, just wanted to let the board and everyone know that we're updating our strategic plan, and hopefully next week we will have a website up and running to get citizen input about Farragut Forward. That's what we're calling it for this next strategic plan update. Okay. So again, look forward to getting that out on social media and in the public, so hopefully they'll be able to answer questions, give us feedback. That's the main thing we want about what they'd like to see in our town going forward. And so that's all I have to report tonight.
Okay, great. And Mr. Hale is not in attendance, so next will be citizens' comments, and I'll start off with at the end of tonight's business meeting, there has been some time reserved for public comment for our Farragut residents. I assume we do have some signed up for this, and
Be quiet in the back. We're still trying to conduct the meeting. Thank you. Or step outside. Thank you.
If so, let's have the ones that have signed up to please step up to the mic.
Speakers tonight, the first one is Michael Wilson.
Michael Wilson, can you please step to the mic?
George, can you pull that door shut?
Good evening, Michael Wilson, 412 Eisenhower Street, Farragut, Tennessee. The last Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting, I raised some questions concerning the lack of Farragut Business Alliance tax filings for 2020 and 2021 on IRS website. I asked if any of the BOMA members, particularly those who sit on the FBA, were aware of any reasons that the IRS 990 forms had not been filed, or if there were any issues the IRS had with the filings. I also asked that the BOMA not auto-renew the $75,000 in town funds provided to the FBA until this issue was resolved. Mr. Krapansky, I believe he's left, but he was here earlier and I talked to him. Mr. Krapansky, the FBA Executive Director, was at the meeting and offered to share the 2020 and 2021 files with me. I requested later that evening and he promptly provided their files the following day, along with proof of the IRS acceptance. Those documents show that the 2020 and 2021 tax filings were submitted and accepted within the IRS guidelines. I want to thank Mr. Krapansky for the prompt response and helping clear up the issue. I also followed up with each of you that Friday, each of the BOMA members that Friday, via email sharing the response provided by the FBA. To my surprise, I received a response that said, quote, "Would your plans for the next board meeting citizens forum be to let everyone watching the meeting on TV know how your gotcha turned out?" Unquote. This was never intended as a gotcha, but a legitimate question and concern based on public records, or in this case, a lack of IRS data. I'm saddened that a legitimate concern from a resident is categorized as a gotcha moment by someone elected to represent all of us in the town. So why did I ask this question at a BOMA meeting? Why not simply ask the FBA? In the past 2.5 years, there has been a targeted effort to discredit myself and others in social media particularly. I and others have been called liars, and worse, by town officials and their supporters. Our reputation and character have been attacked on Nextdoor and Facebook for questioning things like who really contacted Mr. Cullum regarding Biddle Farm. A recent town official email sent to Tony Cox on January 16, 2021, provides us some vindication after 2 years. In that email, the official said it was two people, Mr. Purvis and Mr. Nixon, that contacted the developer. However, since January 2021 Farragut Press article, it has been repeated over and over and over again that it was only Mr. Purvis. That's been done in social media, probably in some of these meetings, and in public. We have concerns with this issue as both Mr. Purvis and Mr. Nixon were members of the FBA Board of Directors and subject to the Tennessee Sunshine Law. Over 30% of their funding is received from this town. However, in Farragut, asking questions about this gets you attacked and discredited in the public sphere. Further, we've seen how these attacks have been coordinated recently. Issues and concerns raised with town officials, the FBA, or local press often get shared with others, including elected officials sitting on this board, and then are used to attack me and others on Nextdoor or Facebook by using half-truths and lack of context. I could provide probably a half a dozen of examples. One example, after I spoke at the FMPC meeting 2 weeks ago, an attack was launched inferring that I and others have supported recent actions before the town, one you just voted on, because we are being compensated by said developers, or there was some form of payback or future job opportunity. The same lady that raised these concerns about Alderman White has done so on social media this week, and I'm tired of it. 2 years later, we're finding out it was two people that contacted Bud Cullum. It wasn't one. Then by someone else on Nextdoor this week, happens to be the spouse of an elected official in this town. These are falsehoods with no basis in fact. I'm sure many of you are aware of these and know who their those people are. For this reason, I am opting to discuss any concerns or issues with the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and the Planning Commission in the public sphere, so that there is video evidence to refute the half-truths or lack of context in the attacks on social media in social media. Again, I want to thank Mr. Kropansky for his prompt response in clearing up the issue. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mike Mitchell.
Well, I guess one thing that I can say is whenever you say that something has been done in the sphere of being illegal, as far as violating the Sunshine Law, first off, there has to be an agenda item, okay? It has to be discussed and it has to be voted on. So if there is no votes taken and no discussion made at an FBA meeting, then I think you've got a dead point, okay?
You're right.
Sir, enough.
So, with that said, Mr. Purvis is not with us any longer. As a member of the FBA or a liquor store owner or a banker in his position, discussions that he has with anyone is his business. Just like it's your business or my business if we have discussions with people. It has nothing to do with the Sunshine Law, okay? I hope you do recognize that that's...
I would like, if,
You
sure,
had
go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Your time. I'd
You've
like
had
to-
yours, and I'm giving you mine right now.
So, oh, sorry, you done yet?
No.
Okay.
As far as being attacked, we have had a series of FOIAs that has had our staff quite busy supplying it for the gotcha that you mentioned, okay? Well, there's nothing there, but